I just want to welcome everyone. I'm Renee Wooding. I'm the Managing Director of Cool Kids Campaign here in Maryland. And welcome to what we hope will be the first in a series of Facebook Live webinars that we're hosting. Next month, we are planning to partner with Kennedy Kreiger Institute to do a session on childhood cancer and bullying. So we hope that some folks will join for that. But tonight, it's going to be all about chemo, brain, and learning. So what a lot of people don't realize is that the effects of chemo don't necessarily end when the chemo does. So sometimes children who have experienced this have changes to the executive function of their brain, and that can lead to slower processing speeds, difficulty with focus and retention, maybe some issues with impulse control. So we're going to learn a little bit more about that tonight and how to help your child overcome those effects. We are recording this session, so it'll be placed on our YouTube channel. So if you're watching this at some point in the future on YouTube, we would ask that you like and subscribe and hit that little bell so you'll be notified of any upcoming sessions that we might have. Our presenter tonight is Erika Carson, and Erika is the founder and CEO of the Brain Bodega, which is a professional tutoring company. And she's the former chief learning officer of Trilogy Mentors. And that's where we actually met Erika. As many of you may know, Cool Kids provides free tutoring to children who have been treated for cancer, and if they reside in Maryland or North Carolina. So we worked with Erika when we started our free tutoring program. And since then, Erika has, with the full support of Trilogy, spun off to create her own company, the Brain Bodega, and she continues to bring her passion and experience to our kids every day, and we're really grateful for that. And one of the things that makes Erika so special is that she herself is a childhood cancer survivor, so she really understands what these kids are going through and is able to relate to them in a really special way. Erika is also an education specialist and technologist and is pursuing her PhD so that she can get an even greater understanding of how technology intersects with education. So we're excited to hear from her tonight and grateful to have her here. I do want to also let you know that this session is not designed to diagnose or treat any issues that your children may have. It's really simply here to provide insights and to provide some tips and tricks that we hope that you will find helpful, as well as some resources. So I would ask that throughout the presentation, please enter any questions that you have into the chat function. And when Erika's finished presenting, we'll ask those questions on your behalf. And also, if you can, please stay till the end. I have a couple of additional resources that I would love to share with you that I think your children may find helpful. And so without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Erika.
Right. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well tonight. Thank you, Cool Kids, for inviting me to go ahead and share. I think you guys know how passionate I am about helping out these kids. They make my day every day. I love working with them, and I know all of my instructor team loves working with them as well. So I'm going to jump in there. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just so I'll kind of talk along with it. So let me just go ahead and do that. I'm not going to put on a formal presentation screen just because sometimes that can block me from seeing everybody. So right now I'm just going to jump into what is chemo brain. So according to the Mayo Clinic, chemo brain is a common term used for all the cognitive issues that cancer treatment can cause for adults, for children, for teens. But what I think you actually end up feeling like as a parent or a student is a little bit more like this. You're a parent, you're kind of pulling your hair out because you just don't know what's going on with your child, especially if you had a child that was really successful in school beforehand and all of a sudden they're struggling. And then your kid, on the other hand, is kind of, hey, I don't know what's going on. I feel kind of spacey. I'm unable to focus. So these are kind of what happens. You feel that you're frustrated, you feel helpless, you feel overwhelmed because you just don't know how to help your child. I mean, the hardest thing for a parent is having a child that is struggling and not feeling like you're being heard. And the same thing is going on with your kids. They don't always have the language to express how they're feeling. I know I've heard parents say, get frustrated because they're like, I ask my kid how they're doing and they say, I don't know, all the time. Sometimes they don't get it either. So just being really patient with them. They're forgetful. I know I'm actually super forgetful, and that's why we're going to talk about some of the strategies that might be helpful for these kids. You may see, and this is not always the case, and again, I am not a doctor. I am an educator and I am a survivor myself. So this is from observation solely, and conversations that I've had, and of course my own experiences. They may be disorganized, or they may have really bad time management. And you as a parent are like, what's going on? You got this assignment a month ago. So from my own personal experience, I'll tell you that, like, if I don't sit down and do something all in one chunk, it doesn't get done because I forgot what I read the night before, or especially the last week. So, having these conversations with your kids, and we'll dive a little bit deeper. The other thing you might be encountering is teachers that don't understand. Your kid looks fine. Their hair is grown out. They have friends. They look healthy. There's really this lack of understanding, I think, in general with mental cognitive issues, because you can't see them. And if the kid is not raising their hand saying, hey, I'm struggling, well, then it doesn't exist. So there's I know next month we're going to talk about bullying and how that plays a role as well, but there's also these teachers that sometimes don't get it, and they can re-traumatize your kid because they are now saying what's wrong with you, rather than saying how can I help you. So we can talk about that as well. Parents feel guilty because they just don't know what to do. Again, this all goes together, these feelings. And then, of course, your kids are exhausted. Well, why are they so tired? They didn't do anything. Because maybe they've just strained their brain so hard all day in school to pick up what little they could, that they have no more energy left. I kind of think of this like a cup. A cup only has so much space, and that if you keep trying to fill it up with water, eventually it's going to overflow and nothing else is going in. So I trying to give you some visuals to work along with. And then in the end, with all of this, kids, like other animals, pick up on your energy. They can tell when you're frustrated. So they not only feel bad because they're not being successful, they feel bad because they're letting you down. They feel bad because they're wasting your time, or that they're different from the other kids, or why can't I keep up with my friends Joe and Robbie? I used to be smart like them and now I'm not. So you hear lots of things of like, I'm stupid. And then sometimes, unfortunately, that will turn into anger. 1 second, I have to sneeze. My apologies. So just being very cognizant, I think what you want to do is just keep your ear to the ground, listen to what your child is saying, and we'll kind of talk about strategies. I'm trying to get through this a little faster because I know we had some tech issues early. So my thing is strategies, really diving into what works for the kids. And this is just a general list. And after we go through this, I know that Cool Kids has lots of resources, and they know how to get in touch with me if you're not in touch with me already, to ask questions. And I set up kind of a session to discuss what you think is going on. If you think your needs might be more individualized. I am an advocate. I always tell the kids when they first meet me, I am there for them. I am not there to make them feel bad. Neither are any of the instructors that they work with. Our goal is to give them the skills, and their parents the skills and strategies they need. So one of the things that I encourage is making schedules. Most kids, when they go to school, K through 12, have a schedule, block schedule. whatever schedule. So they are used to this structure, and that structure will help kids that are having trouble focusing, keeping on task. So when they get home and there's no schedule and they have no focus, they don't know what to do sometimes with their time. And when I talk about that, making schedules, I'm not saying sitting them in front of their desk and making them work for another 3 hours. I'm just talking about making it very clear how their time can be allotted. That includes their playtime, their dinner time, their sleep time, things like that. So they can see, oh, it's 5:30. Maybe I should start doing my homework now, because again, time gets away. Another thing that I love dry erase markers. And the reason I love them so much is I can write on windows, I can write on mirrors, I can write in places where I know that I'm going to see my messages. Right now on my bathroom mirror, I have my list of what I need to do before I travel home for Thanksgiving. And that is just so that I don't forget anything, because especially if you have a kid, maybe like me, I have to travel with an EpiPen now. So I have to make sure I put that on my list. Did I pack it? Because it's not like oh, you can get one at the store. You have to have certain things. And if you get your child in the habit of going to that whiteboard or the mirror to make their list, you're giving them ownership too. Over there, the last thing you want to feel as a kid is that you have no control, and you have no input in your learning, and also feeling like an invalid. Like kids can do so much more than we give them credit for. Another tool, and I'm going to just walk down this list slowly, is a smart pen. They're not always allowed in schools because they are recording devices. Smart pens are from the man who worked at Leapfrog and went over and started his own company. These are fantastic. They got me through grad school. They not only record your notes, and they also record the audio with it, so you can upload it. So for students who are in school and they're not able to focus, this is helping them because it's picking up the audio as well. And then they can go home and either listen to everything that was recorded by their pen, or they can upload it to their computer and read it again. So that's a really great tool for helping kids with cognitive overload. They have something else to back up what they're collecting. My other favorite tool is just a Google Calendar. Honestly, I just was very lucky to be born in the time that I was born in, because of all these technologies that are supporting my own chemo brain as well. Google Calendars are fantastic. Again, it goes to that planning. You don't want to put your kids in a situation where you're doing everything for them, because they get to high school and they get to college, they need to have these little strategies in their back pocket that have become a habit. So they feel like, again, that they have control, and that they have their tool belt of different things they can use to tackle all their challenges. So Google Calendar, I encourage, again, putting every little thing that you can in there, especially if they have a smartphone, which can ping them and remind them, oh, hey, it's time for my shot, or hey, it's time for me to eat dinner. Little things like that can help. The other thing, and I think people kind of, when a kid is not learning, they feel like they have to cram more learning time in. I really encourage play. Research has shown that recess during school has helped kids socially with so many skills. And with kids being isolated already with COVID, and then having medical issues on top, and they're isolated so much, that playtime is not just them doing nothing. It's them building their communication skills. It's them building their own strategies for standing up for themselves sometimes in communication, or advocating for themselves. Playing is so important. It builds other parts of your brain that reading a book doesn't always get. And then just building on that, I talk a lot about non-learning activities. Again, research says most people learn things outside of school. So if you want your kid to be really excited about learning, plant a garden with them, or have them grow plants in the house and be responsible for it. Maybe keep a log or take a photo log of it. That's learning. Even collecting rocks and drawing pictures of them, that's learning. We're so kind of focused in on this. If it's not from a book, if it's not from a calculator, it's not from a computer, it's not learning, which is not the case. So I would encourage these other types of learning, not only because it's more engaging, but also for the deficits that your child might be having. This will fill in the pockets that are working. It gives them that hands-on time. Just kind of explore that a little bit more. And I know I don't want to get too far out on time, but exercise is huge. I know on the days that I don't exercise, it's way harder for me to focus. It is also, I feel like I have more funk in my brain. Maybe it's more gray matter, but that's kind of what I call it. So the exercise helps keep them physically healthy and mentally healthy. The same way you would schedule studying, schedule some exercise time, not King Richard, making sure your kids are out on the tennis court to become Selena and Venus, but like, give them some time to walk the dog for 15 minutes to half an hour every day, or go play outside with their friends, something, or soccer or whatever it is. And I know some of the kids are more fragile, so maybe just walking is good enough, but that exercise can be huge. And then the last thing I kind of want to touch on is talking to their doctors about their diet. It may be that adjusting their diet can make the difference. Like maybe too much sugar is worse for a kid that has gone through all of these things than it is for a kid who hasn't. So check out all of your options. But the biggest thing that I would really say is to listen to your kids and watch your kids, observe them. If you see something is off, kind of keep a log and bring it up with the doctor, or the social worker, whoever it is, so that you can stay informed. And then, of course, reach out to Cool Kids, because they just are a fantastic resource for helping your kids in many different ways, socially, emotionally, educational ways, and that type of resource, other types of resources. So that's kind of where I'm just going to wrap up, because I know some people may have questions.
So I just want to encourage you again, if you haven't already done so, feel free to enter your questions into the chat box so we can ask them of Erika. But I know Taylor does have a question or two here that we want to pass along.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Taylor, Family Communications Coordinator. So while we wait on questions, if you all have any, I have a few for Erika. One of the questions we have here is, if a child is falling behind in elementary school, will there still be time for them to play catch up?
Yeah, and I think that's a huge thing. I think we have this preconceived notion that if a kid falls behind, they're never going to have a good job. I mean, if your second grader is behind, they have lots of time to catch up. And you know what? If it takes them another year to finish school, that's fine, rather than trying to pack information in and making them feel bad, because you're much better off having a kid that's gone through school twice and feels more confident than trying to push a kid through who feels really bad about themselves and is unprepared for whatever they do after high school.
It's really interesting too, Erika. We have an intern right now who's a childhood cancer survivor and was an AB student until he got to college, and then was struggling a bit more. And he learned that his brain processing speed is actually a little bit slower because of the chemo he had when he was 5 years old. But he didn't know that until he was in college. So what he discovered was that he can do really well as long as the test isn't timed. So he needs more time to do things. It's not that he can't do it. He thought he just wasn't as smart as the other kids in his class. And it wasn't that. It was just that he needs more of an allotment of time to get things done because his processing speed was impacted by chemo. And I think some kids outgrow that and some don't. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how to approach a child's teacher, or like what kinds of accommodations can be made for these kids.
Yeah, and the way the accommodations are set up in the United States, there are accommodations, but they kind of go based on IQ more than they do functionality, if that makes sense. Or if you're dyslexic and you've been proven that because there isn't a lot of knowledge about chemo brain right now, what you see with most kids is a 504, which is extended time on a test, and that doesn't always work. I know for me, I like just knowing that I have no limit at all, because the minute I know there's a limit, my anxiety level goes through the roof, and it becomes more of me battling the anxiety than actually being able to complete the content. So I look like an F student when in actuality I'm just an anxious student. So I think that's kind of what can happen. I think if you have a good teacher and you have a good relationship with the school and the school district, they're pretty accommodating. And I would say that, and I think, similar to the intern, I had the same type of thing where I got to college and I was kind of like, hey, what's going on? Because I had such a supportive community when I was in high school. And then you get to college and it's like you're kind of on your own trying to figure things out. And just kind of going on that, if you do have a kid that's going to college, make sure that you're looking at the college from an accommodation perspective as well. You do not want to go to a school that is just a cog in the wheel type of situation, because they may not offer the accommodation or the emotional supportive needs that your child needs to be successful. So like I had a very intimate setting at Tufts University, and it was fantastic. Like I hit my bumps, and I had to take calculus like 3 times. But they were always supportive for the most part. Whereas, in other experiences, it was a big university, cog in the wheel. They did not have that supportive environment, and I felt it. So I would say, for the people that are sending their kids off to college, like really explore that, not just what the campus looks like, not just what the course offerings are.
Thank you. Looks like we have a question on the chat feature.
Yes, just piggybacking off of what you were saying before, it looks like Kelly Mack wanted to share her story a little bit. She has a 17-year-old senior who's having struggles with organization and time, and what she said helps them is that he has an IEP in school. He finished chemo in 2011, but that access with the IEP allows them for certain accommodations, including extra time and tests. So for anyone out there who is looking for those extra resources, this may be a route to consider going down.
And don't feel bad about fighting for an IEP. There's criteria. They may have to make you go through more fire hoops for an IEP than they will for a 504. But if it's your kid and you're really determined, and I've been an advocate on some of these meetings, if you feel like that's what's going to get your kid over the hump, fight for it. It's okay to fight for that, but keep, have a reason for it, not just saying, oh, my kid needs one. Explain like they need it because of X, Y, and Z. Oh, so the difference between a 504 and an IEP, a 504 doesn't allow for the same accommodations. A 504 strictly you get more time to finish work. And the other part of that, and I don't think everyone realizes it, a 504 means extended time on everything. And a lot of times schools will just give the kids extra time on tests. It should also mean extra time on schoolwork, extra time on projects and things like that. So be informed about that when you are speaking to the teachers. Some of the big words that I use or teacher verbiage I use is asking your teachers, like, how are you differentiating for my kid? How are you modifying the instruction so that my kid can handle it? How are you, like, what accommodations are you putting in place? Because accommodations also mean like, oh, are you sending out notes so my kid could just watch the class and listen, because listening and writing doesn't work for them? So just having those conversations. But the IEP is really more like, they can go to get a resource teacher, they can get an extra, like they can get an extra chair when they need it, or they can get PT or OT. So it's a more complex, and some parents don't like the label because IEP and special ed kind of have traditionally gone hand in hand. But what I have told parents is like, whatever you can get it, because it's better to get the help in the beginning and then wean off it than it is to try and catch up when your kid is already feeling bad and way far behind in school.
And Erika, I think that's a really good point, because I get calls sometimes from parents who are really frustrated with their children because they feel like they're not trying, or maybe they're being a little lazy. So how do you tell the difference between a child who is maybe got some challenges and is perhaps struggling a little, as opposed to just they're being a little bit lazy?
Yeah, so that's such a hard thing, because I think people start with calling their kid lazy before they start with, hey, is something wrong? And then so this already created this battle between the children and the parents, that doesn't necessarily need to be there. I kind of think it's more about what have you tried beforehand, and are they being lazy, quote unquote, because they are having a bad learning experience. Like a child who has a math teacher who has made them feel awful about themselves will avoid doing math.
Mhm.
And so it's not lazy, it's avoidance. So really trying to, again, talk to your kids, like talk to the kids and have these conversations like, hey, why don't you like your math class? It's amazing because when I interview every one of the kids that comes on the platform, they will tell you who's the good teacher, who's the bad teacher, why. And you could weed, it's like, oh, because they like so and so better. Well, that's not it. But if it's a, hey, they make me sit in the back of the class and I can't hear or I can't focus, or they don't let me go to the bathroom when you have a special need that your child needs to go, because they can't sit still for a long time. So those little nuances, I think your kids will tell you so much about what is going on. But lazy is more of, and this sounds really bad, but like if you have more of, like, sometimes, when you have a cancer kid, you're like, oh, they almost died, or they've gone through so much, I'm going to give them everything. And then when it comes time to rubber meets the road and you're like, hey, you have to do your work, they're already like, why? I get everything I need and I don't need to do that. And I never would say that it's 100% lazy. There's always some story behind it, because no kid wants to be less than their peers. But that spoiledness can sometimes get in the way of family dynamics. It could also become the tail wagging the dog in some families, where that child controls everything that's going on, and then that can escalate. So I'm always like, squash that as early as possible. You don't want to be mean, but you do want to, as a parent with your kid, try to be as quote unquote normal as possible, have these conversations, add these different things like schedules, but but as a parent, be advocating in the background, like what's going on at school, having these conversations and things like that. So striking that balance between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And we have another question. They've asked that, is it normal that their 17-year-old is somewhat immature into comparison to his peers? They've said he appears to be behind in social development.
First of all, boys, he's just a teenage boy. Just so we're clear, there are some people at 40 that are so immature, and your brain doesn't fully develop for anybody until you're 25. Social skills, yes, I would say social skills, when you've been isolated, you're going to be a little bit behind, or you're going to have fear, especially with what's going on in the world right now. Like, do I really want to interact with someone? They might get me sick, and then if I get sick, I might die. So there's different levels of fear going on. I think with the socialization, with the skills, I think 17, that's still, there's so much wiggle room there. I mean, if they prefer playing with 5-year-olds, then I would say kind of, see what's going on there. But if they're 17 and they're just sillier and they can't focus as much, or they want to play more video games more because video games make them happy, well, then they're just being 17. So I think striking that balance between and understanding like what is a typical 17 to 25-year-old male versus what is, you know, my kid. So I don't think it's a huge issue.
And I would add to that, Erika, just observationally from the role that I have here at Cool Kids, we do see some kids who are like little old souls because they've been through so much in such a short period of time. But the medical research that I've read in writing grants would indicate that it is very common for childhood cancer survivors to reach social milestones later. So things like getting a job, getting married, buying a house, it's not uncommon that they'll be a little later in life doing those things.
Right. But they'll be mature in other ways because
Yeah.
they've been around adults and doctors their whole life. So you'll see this weird, like, well, why you can have a conversation with a 50-year-old. Why can't you have a conversation with your 17-year-old friends? Well, because I've been around the older people. So it's kind of this balance. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I
Taylor,
think
do we have other questions?
Just we can make this one our last question, kind of tying it back to the milestones. So how should a parent go about helping their child from comparing themselves to other peers with like social milestones that they're reaching, learning milestones? What would you advise parents to help their children just be more confident in where they are?
I think, and I'm kind of working on something right now with this. I think it's how you deal with it. Like, I think one of my favorite lines is one of the Cool Kids students where I asked him something and he said, well, you know, I'm a superhero too, just like Iron Man, because we both have ports. So he feels empowered by what he's going through. Whereas in other situations, it's more like, well, we don't want the kid to be scared. We don't want to tell them everything. And so there could be some shame tied to that. I think empowering your kids is really about like, hey, this sucks, but we're going to get through this together. And here's how we're going to do it. Here's your role. Here's what I need you to do. And here's what, you know, mom or dad or grandma, here's what we're going to do to have your back and make sure that you're going to be successful. So you're always going to have someone who's here for you. You're stronger than anybody else. I tell some of the other Facebook groups that I'm in, I'm like, we're superheroes. We've gone through this. We have learned more about the world in a different lens than somebody else. So really empowering them to own what they've been through, be honest at the level that they can handle. You don't need to tell a 3-year-old like, oh, by the way, you might relapse and die. Like that, you don't want to say that type of thing. But being really realistic, like, hey, you know what, you may not be feeling well, but you're really strong, you're powerful, and reinforcing that. You don't want to overdo it, because there's been a backlash with too much positivity, how that can be damaging. But you do want to make sure, like, hey, you're okay, you're good. You may be different, but let's embrace that and rock on. You know, that's kind of what I believe.
That's great, Erika. Thank you for all the advice you've shared. I do want to share a few more resources for parents that they might find helpful. First, shameless self-promotion. If you're in Maryland or North Carolina, Cool Kids does offer free tutoring through Erika's company. Her tutors are all excellent. They're all certified teachers, former teachers, retired teachers. You know, they're all completely certified to be doing this job. And what she does that's really special is that she matches your child to the tutor based not only on their academic need, but on their style of learning. So for instance, if your child is really struggling with geometry, but he loves basketball, she's gonna teach them through the angle of a shot or something that they can really relate to. So we see kids who usually run at the word math, who can't wait to get online with their tutor. So we have one young man that was failing spelling. He comes from a family where English is not the first language, and in 12 weeks he had a B. So we're pretty proud of the program, and we will be increasing the size. My goal next year is to double the size of the number of students that we can accommodate in the tutoring program. So So we're excited about that, and we have funding to do that. We also are kind of changing some of our programming. If you've come to some of our movie nights or things like that, you'll see that the kids normally do a craft. Well, we just received a grant from the Mitzvah Foundation that will pay for STEM activities. So instead of just doing a simple craft, we'll do something where they actually learn something, but they don't know they're learning something. So for instance, Taylor here worked at Halloween with our younger children to teach them how and why spiders create webs, and then they created their own spider web. So we got a grant that will pay for STEM materials for 2022, and that's our goal, is to incorporate more fun but educational things into our programming instead of just fluff. The other resources that I would suggest to you would be the Neuropsychology Oncology Clinic at Kennedy Kreiger, and we'll put these in our notes for the YouTube session too. So if you don't get this, you can either look there or email me. It's renee@coolkidscampaign.org. The Neuropsychology Oncology Clinic of Kennedy Kreiger can do a few things. They can really work with your child to figure out what's going on. Do they have slower processing speeds? Do they have some effects to their brain based on the chemo or radiation they may have received? If they need a referral to psychology for behavioral issues, they can handle that too. And then Dr. Lisa Carey is part of that program. She has a grant that enables her to provide resources so that she can work with your patient, your child, with the parent, and with the schools to help them get the support that they need as well. And she provides those services for free as long as you're part of the Neuropsychology Oncology Clinic and you're one of their patients. So that's worth looking into if you're really struggling. The other service that I love is a nonprofit out of Pittsburgh that we partner with. They're called Connecting Champions, and you can find them at connectingchampions.org. Again, another free service. And they match children and teens to mentors. So if you have a child who maybe wants to be an engineer or a chef or whatever it is, they will align them with someone who is a professional in that field and can help them navigate their way to that career. So it could be that that chef is going to tell your child, give him advice that might be the same advice mom's been giving him for the last 6 months, but he might hear it better coming from this person who's in the career that he desires to go into. The other thing I really like about them is that they help kids, especially teens, understand that you are not your diagnosis. So, you might get labeled, you don't want your child to be labeled as the kid with cancer. So this really helps them see that's not your identity. That's just something you're going through, and it's finite and it's going to end. And what do you want to be at the end of that? And what do we need to do to help you get to that goal? And for younger kids, they may not have a career goal, but they might love to draw. So they'll align them with somebody that is an artist and that can help them, really focus on that skill and focus on what they're good at instead of the cancer experience that they're going through. So they do a wonderful job too. We're happy to connect you with them. And, we're working all the time to get more resources, and we'd love to hear from you as far as what you need and how we can be more helpful. But with that, I just want to thank everybody who signed in and everybody who watches this on YouTube. And we hope you found it helpful and that you will look for our future sessions. Again, December, we're hoping will be a session with Kennedy Kreiger on childhood cancer and bullying, which unfortunately is happening more than we would like. And sometimes Erika's hearing about it from her students, maybe before mom and dad hear about it. So, you may not always know what's going on, and we want to help you figure that out. But Erika, thank you so much for sharing your time and your talent with us. And I hope everybody found that helpful and that you have a great day.